Karamo Brown is sharing his side of the story. He goes on to say that cracks in the group's dynamic began after a sexual harassment complaint was filed against him in the first few weeks of filming, following a brief fling with an unnamed castmate.
At 45 years old, Karamo Brown built a career on helping strangers through their most vulnerable moments. As the culture and lifestyle expert on Netflix's Emmy-winning series Queer Eye, he became a familiar face to millions. A man whose job was to offer emotional guidance, accountability, and warmth. But behind the heartwarming television moments, a very different story was quietly unfolding. In June 2026, Brown finally broke his silence, and what he revealed about the years inside the Fab Five is more complicated, more painful, and far more human than anything that ever made it to air. The man behind the culture expert. Karamo Brown was born on November 2, 1980, in Houston, Texas. Growing up in Coral Springs, Florida, in predominantly white neighborhoods, Brown often felt caught between identities, navigating his Jamaican heritage, his sexuality, and his sense of belonging simultaneously. He made his television debut in the 2004 MTV reality show The Real World, Philadelphia, where he became the first openly gay African-American to appear on reality television. That milestone was not just a personal achievement, it signaled something larger about representation on screen and who gets to take up space in mainstream media. Education shaped Brown's approach to his work. He graduated from Florida A&M University with a degree in business administration before television consumed his career. He worked as a social worker, a background that would later define the kind of support he offered on screen. Where other members of the Fab Five focused on clothes, food, grooming, and interiors, Brown's role was the most intimate. He sat with people in their emotional truth, pushed them toward honesty, and asked the questions others avoided. In 2015, Brown co-founded 6in10.org, an organization that works to combat HIV stigma and provides mental health support and HIV education to the Black LGBT community. That activism reflected a personal conviction that ran through everything he did publicly. He talked about mental health at a time when many in public life still treated it as weakness. He spoke about the pain of feeling unseen in ways that resonated with audiences who had never seen someone like him on television. The message he delivered week after week on Queer Eye was consistent. People deserve care, people deserve grace, and silence does not protect anyone. Queer Eye first premiered on Netflix on February 7, 2018, as a reboot of the original 2003 Bravo program, Queer Eye for the Straight Guy. The show was built around 5 gay male experts, each with a specific area of focus, who would spend time with a nominated subject to help transform their life across multiple dimensions. Brown handled what the show called culture and lifestyle, which in practice meant therapeutic conversation, emotional confrontation, and personal accountability. He became the member of the Fab Five most closely associated with vulnerability and depth, a role he embraced fully. Over the course of its run, Queer Eye was nominated for 37 Emmy Awards, earning 6 consecutive Emmy Awards for Outstanding Structured Reality Program between 2018 and 2023, with the series earning a total of 11 Emmys. The accolades piled up. Audiences across the world responded to the warmth of the 5 hosts and the transformations they facilitated. What the cameras never showed was the fracture quietly spreading underneath. A fracture that Brown says began almost immediately after filming started and never truly healed. For years, Brown stayed quiet. He continued to appear on screen, to deliver messages of growth and self-worth, and to promote a show whose inner life looked nothing like its public face. The gap between performance and reality grew wider season after season. And when the 10th and final season arrived, bringing with it a press tour that would have placed him back in close proximity to the people he says made him feel like an outsider, Brown made a decision that shocked fans and colleagues alike. He refused to go. What followed confirmed what he had been carrying alone for years. And the full story runs far deeper than a single missed interview. Stay glued till the very end. The early fracture that changed everything. Brown told People magazine that the show negatively impacted his mental health for years, and that the seemingly positive energy among the show's main cast members, coined the Fab Five, was fabricated to maintain the show's success. That admission alone carries significant weight. A show built entirely on authenticity and emotional openness was, according to the man whose job it was to model those qualities, maintaining a front that masked something far more painful. Brown said he felt like an outsider among the cast from Season 1, Week 1. That phrasing is precise and deliberate. Not after a disagreement, not following a specific incident, but from the very beginning. Something in the group dynamic made Brown feel excluded before the show had even established its footprint. The reasons for that exclusion became clearer as he shared more. Brown said the first divisions between him, Van Ness, France, Horowski, and Bobby Burke followed a sexual mistreatment complaint that was filed against him in the first few weeks of filming. According to Brown, he and an unnamed member of the Fab Five had developed a relationship during the show's casting phase that he described as fun and flirtatious. When a sexual harassment complaint was then filed, Brown initially assumed the unnamed castmate was responsible. He later discovered the complaint had come from an anonymous third party entirely unconnected to that relationship. Brown maintains he was cleared of any wrongdoing, though a source inside production disputed his characterization of events. The damage had already been done. Accusation and confusion had been introduced into a group still in the early stages of forming trust, and the atmosphere never recovered. Brown said the incident broke the group, adding that they all knew the divide between them. That divide did not fade with time. It calcified. Seasons passed, the show grew in popularity, and the public saw five men operating with warmth and chemistry. Behind the cameras, according to Brown, a group was functioning with a set of interior relationships that bore little resemblance to what made it on screen. Brown also said the strained relationship between the Fab Five was the result of hostile behavior by executives and members of production. That detail is important because it distributes responsibility beyond interpersonal personality clashes. The environment itself, according to Brown, enabled and sustained the toxic dynamics. Brown referenced a broader toxic culture within the production, revealing that when examples of poor behavior cropped up, everyone would just say that was just that person, instead of addressing whether the behavior was appropriate for a professional environment, and that this impacted him negatively and consistently. A show about helping people show up better for themselves was, according to its most vocal cast member, operating with a production culture that dismissed concerning behavior rather than addressing it. The production company ITV America and Scout Productions pushed back on this framing in a statement, saying they strongly disagreed with any characterization that concerns raised during production were ignored or dismissed, and that throughout the series' run, any issues brought to production leadership were taken seriously and addressed appropriately. The company added that it remained proud of the show's lasting impact and the community it helped build. Yet, an insider quoted by People acknowledged that Queer Eye helped a lot of people, but the environment was toxic as hell in reality. The gap between those two statements, one from official production and one from someone who witnessed the interior life of the show, captures the central tension in everything Brown has since described. The show was genuinely meaningful to its audience. The help it offered to the people it featured was real, and simultaneously, the conditions under which it was made caused lasting impact to at least one of the 5 people most closely associated with its message. Both things can be true at once, and Brown's willingness to say so publicly represents something significant. Sobriety, depression, and a mother's tears. What makes Brown's account so disarming is not the interpersonal drama alone, but the personal cost attached to it. Brown revealed that he relapsed during Season 3 after 12 years of being sober. That disclosure carries enormous weight, given everything the show represented. Brown was simultaneously one of television's most visible advocates for emotional health and accountability, while privately battling a relapse he kept hidden from the public. The contrast between the two realities is sharp enough to be painful. Brown told people, "I was depressed. It felt shameful because I was teaching people that they could be better, but in my own life I was trapped." Shame is a particular kind of weight. It compounds isolation rather than alleviating it. Brown was not simply struggling privately. He was struggling privately while building a public identity specifically around the idea that people should not be ashamed of their struggles, that honesty and vulnerability are the foundation of growth. The contradiction between his public message and his private experience intensified the difficulty. The relapse was connected directly to the on-set tensions he described. Brown did not separate the professional toxicity from the personal breakdown. He traced a direct line from feeling like an outsider, from absorbing ongoing hostility, from the accumulated weight of a fractured group dynamic to the collapse of the sobriety he had maintained for over a decade. That connection matters. It reframes the behind-the-scenes drama from entertainment gossip into something with genuine human consequence. Brown also cited a specific instance where his mother overheard his co-stars, allegedly Van Ness, France, and Porowski, according to multiple sources, talking about him negatively while on set in Washington, D.C. in 2025. His mother, Charmaine, had been given production headphones to observe filming during a set visit, and during a moment when Brown briefly stepped away, she heard what was being said about her son. Brown never asked for details of what was said, but described seeing tears in his mother's eyes. That image is striking in its simplicity. A man who spent years teaching audiences about emotional resilience watched his mother cry because of something said about him by the people he had worked alongside for years. Brown quoted his mother repeating the words, "I thought they were your friends," and said the moment made him realize he could no longer stay silent about how often he had been made to feel like an outsider. The mother's voice functions as a catalyst here. Brown had endured years of feeling excluded without going public. What changed was not the severity of the incident, but the way it landed on someone he loved. His mother's pain gave shape to something he had been absorbing and managing alone. Van Ness, France, and Porowski have not directly addressed the hot mic incident. Van Ness had previously spoken out in 2024 following a Rolling Stone investigation that included allegations of emotional and verbal abuse on set, saying the article was not really based in reality, and acknowledging that while the piece was overwhelmingly untrue and done in bad faith, it still prompted some personal reflection. Brown, for his part, did not frame his account as a simple story of victimhood. He acknowledged that there were times he was hurt and would lash back out, and said he recognized his part and how things he did impacted people, adding that everyone deserved grace for how they handled themselves and one another. That measured quality in Brown's account separates it from a straightforward accusation narrative. He was not asking for absolution by pointing at others. He was trying to account for something complicated and painful with honesty. including honesty about his own responses to being hurt. But the moment that finally forced him out of silence came not on set, but in front of a camera that millions were watching. Stay glued till the very end. The press tour, the public break, and what comes next. The cast of Queer Eye was scheduled for several press events ahead of the show's 10th and final season. But Brown was notably absent when the group appeared on CBS Mornings and The Today Show on January 20th, 2026. His absence was not announced in advance. It arrived as a last-minute withdrawal that caught both his co-stars and the programs themselves off guard. Brown sent a statement explaining that he was withdrawing from the show's press activities to preserve his mental health, saying he felt he had been mentally and emotionally abused for years. The statement was read aloud on live television by CBS Mornings co-host Gayle King, placing the accusation directly in front of a morning audience without any of the usual softening of a prepared segment. The moment was raw and unmistakably public. Brown had chosen not to quietly disappear, but to name what he was doing and why, even if he withheld specific details at that stage. Bobby Burke, who had starred on Queer Eye for 8 seasons before announcing his departure in 2023, showed his support for Brown in the comments section of Brown's most recent Instagram post following the missed appearances. That gesture of solidarity from someone who had himself navigated a difficult exit from the show added another layer to the broader picture of dysfunction. Burke's own departure had been surrounded by speculation. In November 2023, Burke stunned fans when he announced his departure from the series after 8 seasons, and a Rolling Stone exposé published in March 2024 accused France and Porowski of engaging in mean girl antics to get Burke removed from the series and make way for Jeremiah Brent. France denied those claims directly, stating he did not get his friend the job by removing someone else. The arrival of Jeremiah Brent as Burke's replacement in Season 9 had already drawn attention to the fissures within the group's history. Brown's withdrawal from the press tour brought everything to a head simultaneously. Brown also unfollowed all of his co-stars on social media except for Jeremiah Brent, a quiet signal that carried meaning for fans watching closely. Multiple sources familiar with the cast's dynamics said Brown's relationships with France and Van Ness were especially fraught, with Van Ness described as someone whose frustrations were often expressed openly, while others were more likely to create tension behind the scenes. Brown himself approached the characterization of his former co-stars with deliberate care. When addressing Van Ness specifically, he did not lead with grievance. Brown said he and Van Ness had not spoken directly, but that he felt no hostility, and described the work he had seen Van Ness pouring into himself as commendable and inspiring, adding that growth is not always public-facing, but that he respected Van Ness for how he was currently moving through life. Antoni Porowski, speaking to Variety in the aftermath of the drama, said he was left with more questions than answers, and expressed sadness that the situation served as a distraction from honoring the countless people who had worked on the show from day one up until the very end. His response reflected a genuine attempt to hold multiple truths at once, without either dismissing Brown's account or fully endorsing it. What does Brown himself want from the act of speaking out? The answer he has offered is not vengeance or public reckoning. It is closer to the same thing he spent years asking of the people who sat across from him on screen: honesty about what actually happened, accountability without shame, and the understanding that naming a painful truth is not an attack, but a form of release. Brown said he felt like an outsider from Season 1, Week 1, and for years he carried that feeling in silence while the show went on to earn awards, reach global audiences, and change lives. The irony that a show about authentic transformation was built on a fractured foundation is not lost on anyone paying attention. The story of Karamo Brown and Queer Eye is not simply a story about caste tensions or behind-the-scenes rivalries. It is a story about what it costs to perform wellness publicly while privately struggling. It is a story about the gap between what a show promises its audience and what it actually provides for the people making it. And it is a story about the specific difficulty of being the only person in a group who consistently feels like they do not fully belong, and choosing to say so only after everything has ended. The show ran from February 2018 to January 2026. It earned awards, built community, and gave a platform to queer voices at a time when that visibility still carried genuine cultural weight. The 10 seasons it produced remain part of its legacy. So does the account Karamo Brown has now chosen to share. Both things are real, and both belong in the same conversation. For millions of viewers around the world, the series represented hope, empathy, and the idea that people could change when they were met with understanding instead of judgment. Week after week, audiences watched lives transformed, confidence restored, and difficult conversations brought into the mainstream. The impact stretched far beyond entertainment. It influenced discussions about identity, acceptance, self-worth, and belonging, helping many people feel seen for the first time. The story of what the Fab Five really looked like from the inside is not a story with clean villains or simple resolutions. It is the story of a group of people who made something extraordinary while simultaneously failing each other in ways that left real damage. Like many successful collaborations, the public saw the finished product while the private struggles remained hidden behind the scenes. How anyone chooses to reckon with that says everything about what the show was actually teaching all along. The lessons were never just about transformation. They were also about honesty, accountability, and the complicated reality of being human. With this, we have come to the end of this video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, do well to like, comment, and subscribe for more content. To enjoy more thrilling stories, click now on the following video that pops up on your screen.